Welcome to the zoning board meeting for December 4th. Please stand, and we're going to call the meeting to order first, and then we'll do the pledge. Sorry. Sit, 1 second. Call the meeting to order, then we'll stand.
Okay. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10-4-10, and the regulations governing remote meetings, NJAC 539-1.5, I hereby announce that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting was provided in a notice dated January 14th, 2023, that was sent to the Asbury Park Press, Two River Times, posted on the bulletin board, and on the main access door to Town Hall, filed in the clerk's office, and posted on the township's website, www.homedaletownship.com.
Roll call.
Mr. Burkle?
Present.
Ms. Campus? Ms. Gerhart?
Present.
Mr. Giampolo?
Present.
Mr. Luciani?
Here.
Mr. Marzocca?
Here.
Mr. Orphanatopoulos?
Here.
Mr. Hutchinson? Mr. Hutchinson is absent. Mr. Frigiola? Mr. Frigiola is absent.
Okay, so now we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders and military. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see it's relevant. I mean, you could say it. Go ahead.
Okay.
Item number 1.
Public hearing number 3, item number 1, Zoning Board of Adjustment 2023-10, Andrews Management Group LLC, 125-127 Red Hill Road, Block 21, Lot 4, and 4.01 R40A Zone. D1 Use Variance. Bifurcated application seeking a D1 use variance to construct 2 3-story medical office buildings in the R40A residential zone.
Might as well do it now. Before we get started, we lost our engineer. He passed away. Some of you may have known him, Bob Bucko, and it's a tough thing to lose somebody like that I've known for so long. But today we have William White that's going to be taking over. Marty, you want to swear him in?
So we'll swear in for the application. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're to give tonight is the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay, for the record, and Kate, you've already been sworn in. You're still sworn in on this application, so.
And I spoke to William a little earlier. You want me to call you William or Bill? Bill's fine. Okay, Bill. Bill is up to date. You saw all the videos. You read everything. Yes. So you're pretty sure you're on top of things. We'll test you today. We'll see. All right. It's been a while since we saw you. Do you want to give us like maybe a 5-minute recap of where we were, where we are, what's going to happen today?
Yes, that's my plan to. Thank you. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobi, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. No, I keep pressing.
Underneath, there's a switch
there's a
underneath.
switch.
There we go. Thank you. We originally appeared several months ago. At that meeting, the applicant testified and our engineer began testimony. The applicant was subject to cross-examination at that meeting. The last meeting was last month, I believe. The engineer came back and provided testimony. Counsel for the objectors wasn't present, so did not have an opportunity to cross-examine him. And our engineer was not available tonight. We knew that all in advance, so we will have to bring the engineer back whenever this is rescheduled to finish the engineering testimony and have the cross-examination. Tonight, we only have our traffic expert. We do have a planner, but we can't put the planning testimony on until all the other professionals finish their testimony, so there's adequate support for the planning testimony. So again, we have traffic tonight. Counsel is present for the objectors. I assume he's going to cross-examine traffic. and then we're gonna be finished until we reschedule, at which time we'll bring our engineer and our planner.
So at some time or another, I think some of the board members are interested in doing an on-site. Kind of get a lay of the land type of thing. I don't know if we should wait much longer, because as the weather's getting colder and colder, whether we should try to schedule something after they've, present today. But I don't know if the engineer has responded to any of our comments from our previous meetings and is going to modify anything, or you're gonna modify anything based on our comments. So that's something that you guys have to figure out, because there is a bunch of things, and we have an on-site criteria that we look for, so that when we go there, we can understand what this place would look like if it gets approved.
Right, so we could certainly stake out whatever areas you want staked out. You just have to tell us what locations, and then we're gonna have to do it with the public so that council can appear, but whenever it works for you is fine with us.
I think maybe we could try to do it in December. What do you guys think? Because, I know it's the holidays coming, but then we're gonna go into January, and then it really gets bitter cold out there. So, we'll, it'll have to be probably on a Saturday morning, so we'll get to it a little later, in case I forget, somebody remind me. And we'll gotta figure a date out for that.
Okay, that's fine. Whenever
Okay.
it works for you is fine with us.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, our traffic expert is John Ray. I'd like to request that he be sworn in, and then we'll seek to qualify him.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
John, state your name and address, please.
John Ray, REA. I am a principal with McDonough and Ray Associates, a traffic engineering firm located at 1431 Lakewood Road, Manasquan, New Jersey.
And, Mr. Ray, can you place your credentials on the record? We're seeking to have you qualified as a traffic expert.
Sure, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My field of expertise is traffic engineering. I have a total of 50 years' experience in the traffic engineering field, the last 40 of which have been doing consulting work here in the state of New Jersey. Educationally, I have an undergraduate degree in civil engineering from NJIT and a master's degree in transportation engineering from NYU. And I've testified before this board and literally, unfortunately, hundreds of boards throughout the state over the last 40 years.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Okay, we accept you.
Could we check with counsel for the objector to see if he has any issues with qualifications?
Okay. Where is he? Oh, okay, there you are.
Rob Simon from Herald Law on behalf of the Bansky family. I have no opposition to qualifications for this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, your office prepared, under your supervision, I assume, the report that was submitted dated December 8th of 2023?
Correct.
Would you describe for the board what you did to prepare the report, and then go into your findings and conclusions, please?
Sure. Well, it is a full traffic impact analysis, in my opinion. It includes several visits that were made to the site to review existing roadway and traffic conditions in the area. Peak hour traffic counts were conducted in the fall of 2023 at the signalized intersection at the Garden State Parkway southbound off-ramp at exit 114, where the fourth leg of the intersection is the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. That traffic signal is just to the north of the property in question, so that was the best place to obtain a traffic count in order to get the peak hour traffic volumes that were passing the site frontage. And we also did an off-site traffic analysis of our impact at that intersection. We prepared estimates of traffic that would be generated by the medical office space based on Institute of Transportation Engineers data, widely used by traffic engineering professionals, accepted by the NJDOT, by Monmouth County, and so that's what was used to project peak hour traffic volumes. We distributed the traffic volumes at the site access to Red Hill Road based on just looking at population densities in the area, a little bit more population density to the north than the south, so we distributed traffic 2/3 to the north, 1/3 to the south. That actually hurts us because the left turn movement out of the site driveway is the critical movement to be made, and we kind of, I wouldn't say overestimated it, but we looked at a worst case scenario, one in which there would be more left turns being made out of the site driveway than right turns. We projected traffic volumes to a design year of 2026 after reviewing the NJDOT's background traffic growth rate data for the area. And then we surcharged our traffic onto the no-build 2026 traffic volumes, and we calculated levels of service for the off-site intersection at exit 114, the signalized intersection, and for our site driveway. After we did the level of service calculations for the site driveway, even though we came up with what I believe are acceptable levels of service for exiting traffic during the morning and afternoon peak hours, the afternoon peak hour level of service for our driveway was projected to be a level of service E. Still considered to be acceptable. Anything better than level of service F is considered to be acceptable. But I took it upon myself to do some additional studies. We actually did a gap study. We had our traffic counter go out to the site frontage and actually look at the gaps that were along Red Hill Road to see if the actual level of service and the left turn movement out of the site driveway could be done easier or better than level of service E, because the signal at exit 114 periodically stops southbound traffic on Red Hill Road. So we did the gap study. The gap study turned out to be very beneficial for us, because what it showed was there were significant gaps, many gaps in excess of 8 seconds. And I want to go back and just say, when we do a gap study, you're looking for gaps in excess of 7 seconds in order to make a left turn, and that would be in 2 directions of travel. You're looking for gaps in excess of 7 seconds to be able to make a left turn out of the site driveway onto Red Hill Road. Conservatively, we only looked at gaps in excess of 8 seconds. And we found that there were, to give you an example, the afternoon peak hour, when the traffic volumes on Red Hill Road are higher, that's the critical peak hour. We had 103 gaps over 8 seconds from 3 to 4 p.m., 141 gaps from 4 to 5 p.m. over 8 seconds, and 91 gaps over 8 seconds from 5 to 6 p.m. Some of those gaps were substantially larger than 8 seconds. They were as much as 20, 25 seconds. And I only bring that up because when you have gaps substantially in excess of 8 seconds, you can get multiple cars out of the site driveway. You can get 3, 4, 5 left turns out if you have a 25-second gap. And so just wanted to point that out. That gap study was done back in November of 2023. And because this process has taken as long as it has, we went back out, and in September 17th, 2024, I redid the gap study for the same 3 peak hours in the afternoon. Numbers came out very similar. 87 gaps over 8 seconds from 3 to 4 p.m., 102 over 8 seconds from 4 to 5 p.m., and 108 over 8 seconds from 5 to 6 p.m. So I'm very confident that based on the gap study, and I must tell you that I've been out to the site multiple occasions during the afternoon peak hour, which is again the critical peak hour. I've sat there, I've watched the operation of the traffic signal. The gaps are real, and they will allow our traffic to get out of the site safely and efficiently. So the first thing I concluded was that the site access to Red Hill Road will operate safely and efficiently. We do need a site triangle to be cleared on the opposite side of Red Hill Road. God bless you. And that's in the report. I think our engineer may have discussed it at 2 meetings ago. And it's on the opposite side of the road, and there are 2 options to obtain the site triangle. One would be for my client to get in touch with the owner of that property and try to, it's a very small site triangle, but some of the vegetation and the trees need to be cleared so that people making a left turn out of our driveway can see northbound traffic on Red Hill Road. So we do need that site triangle. The county is aware of it. We've made an application to the county. They don't seem to have a lot of traffic issues in their first review of the application, but they're aware of the fact we need the site triangle. And one option to get the site triangle would be for my client to obtain the property himself. But realistically, what's going to wind up happening, that's in Middletown Township. There's a application in Middletown for townhomes. Probably folks in Homedale are aware of it, maybe, maybe not. There is an application for a residential project on that property. My expectation is that the county's going to ask them, that developer, to take care of the site triangle. And we wouldn't probably have to go to the extent of getting a surveyor out there, getting the site triangle laid out, getting an appraisal, and having my client pay for it. But if that's what he has to do, That's what he has to do.
But John, in either event, that site triangle has to be obtained as a condition of approval if this board were to approve the
Yes,
application.
correct. So, first conclusion I came to was that the site driveway would operate acceptably. We also took a look at the signalized intersection at exit 114 there. We wanted to take a look at what our impact would be at that intersection during the design year. And based on the analysis and what our impact will be, during the morning peak hour for the 2026 design year for the no-build condition, that would be without our traffic, we have a level of service B with an average of 18.4 seconds of delay per vehicle. For the build condition with our traffic, the level of service remains at a B level of service, and there's an increase of delay of 0.4 seconds, so we go from 18.4 seconds per vehicle to 18.8 seconds per vehicle. That's the increase during the morning peak hour. For the afternoon peak hour, the no-build level of service is a C level of service with 23.9 seconds of average delay. And for the build condition with us, it remains a C level of service with an increase to 24.1 seconds, which is an increase of 0.2 seconds. So the second thing I concluded was that the off-site traffic impact from this project, should it be approved by the zoning board, would have a minimal impact and would not have a significant negative impact on the adjacent signalized intersection at exit 114. The last thing I did in the preparation of the traffic study was again look at the site plan, particularly with respect to the parking that's provided. Your ordinance requires 199 parking spaces. That's what's been provided on the plan. I also included a section in my report. I do not think, quite frankly, 199 spaces will be required based on our experience and based on taking a look at, like, for example, the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation data, which for buildings of this size would require 137 spaces instead of 199. We also, in response to this, we've been working on this job for a couple of years. We also did some parking counts at some of the medical offices north of the Parkway up by Bayshore Hospital, all in Homedale Township. We must have looked at a half dozen sites to look at what actual parking numbers we were getting up there, and we were getting no more than 3 vehicles per 1,000 square feet, which, again, for the amount of space that we're proposing, we would need about 97 parking spaces. So what I concluded from the review of the parking numbers was that we can provide the 199 that's required by the township, but my recommendation, should the project go forward, would be that a substantial amount of that parking be banked, be green banked, leave that space green. I don't think we're gonna need them. If we do need them, we'll construct them. And that basically summarizes it.
And,
Can
John,
I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
On the parking, what offices did you look at? Because the ones I go to at North Beer Street, usually, except early in the morning, they're full. So,
I can provide you with a list. I mean, we're gonna have another meeting. They were up off North Beer Street. I can give you the addresses. I guess we can go over that now if I can find them.
121. There's a whole bunch there, starting from,
All right, yeah, 668 North Beer Street. The Garden State Medical Arts Plaza at 721 and 723 North Beer Street. The Bayshore Medical Building at 702/704 North Beer Street. Homedale Executive Plaza, 717, 719 North Beer Street. The Homedale Medical Arts Building, 733 North Beer Street. And 735 North Beer Street, which is a medical building that is operated by Bayshore Medical Center.
so you're telling us that all of those, I mean, I know that area very well. My other hat, I have them on the first aid squad, and we go to a lot of calls on that street. And every time we're in there, there's no place to park. So it's hard to believe that you're telling me.
That's because they provided less than what your ordinance required. That's
Well,
why, you know,
that's
the parking lots may be full, but they're not as large as they would be today under your ordinance requirements. So I understand. And I don't want to make a big deal out of that. I only mention that because if we do go forward, I think from an environmental standpoint, drainage, things of that nature, we can green bank some of these 199 spaces, but we can provide what is required by the municipal ordinance.
Okay.
We can do it.
Does that answer your question, Gene?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions.
I have two follow-ups, and then
Okay, go ahead.
first follow-up is you indicated Monmouth County has already conducted at least one review.
Correct.
If this application were approved here, we'd also have to obtain Monmouth County Planning Board approval, correct?
Yes, we do.
And that roadway is a Monmouth County road.
It's under county jurisdiction, correct.
And then just to emphasize the parking, the applicant has no issue building the 199, so you're not requesting that, you're just suggesting from an environmental point of view, if the board were to consider it, it would be up to the board.
Correct.
But we have no issue building.
No issue, we can meet the ordinance requirement.
That's all yours.
Okay, so my first question is things that I know already, but I'm gonna ask them anyway for the record. You know what the speed limit is on Red Hill Road in that spot?
I noted it in one of my field visits. I believe it's 40 or 45.
Okay, so being that you were at that site is right past the bridge coming over the parkway and coming downhill and coming around a curve coming towards the parkway. So my first question is, I think that a lot of people leaving that site are gonna be making left turns. So they have to cross over to the other side. It's not like Sloan that they have a light there. So can you talk a little bit about that as
Sure.
far as safety goes? How is that gonna happen? The gap that you spoke about, is that gonna be enough? At somebody going 45 or 50 miles an hour over the parkway? Will that
Well,
person have enough time to move?
I'll respond in a couple of ways. Number one, I agree with you. Most people will make the left. That's what we modeled in our traffic study. We assume that 2/3 of the people exiting the site will be making a left. Number two, we did do the gap study, and the gap study, when you're talking about traffic coming at a high rate of speed over the parkway, there's the traffic light there. The reason why it's gonna work and work acceptably is because when that traffic light turns red, traffic is stopped on Red Hill Road, and that provides the gaps in southbound traffic for the traffic to safely make a left
Which
turn out.
traffic light are you talking about? The
The-
one
the
on
light
Crawford's corner?
at exit 114.
Okay, because there's another light on the other side.
Correct. But that light is so close, it really has an impact on gaps on southbound Red Hill Road. The third thing I want to say that's a positive in our estimation is we are on the outside of the curve. That maximizes sight distance. We're not on the inside of the curve, we're on the outside of the curve. So the sight distance is not an issue, assuming that the sight triangle is cleared. And I guess the last thing I wanted to mention was, we do need the sight triangle, and it is my expectation that we get the sight triangle, the county will approve the application. And I guess last but not least, I know the property is zoned for single-family homes and not for this use, and we do require the use variance. Any development of this property is gonna require that sight triangle in order for traffic to safely get out onto Red Hill Road, whether it's this or permitted use or any other use. So,
Well, considering it's a medical building and who may be going there, and a lot of seniors, I'm not picking on seniors in particular, but they're not reactive as quickly as a younger person, so they look, and the next thing you know, a guy's doing 45, 50, 60 even, comes over the top of the hill, he can't react to that quick enough. So I'm kind of concerned about that, and it's something that when we do the on-site, I'm personally gonna stand up there and try to look and see if I was getting out of that driveway, what I would have to do to get past
Okay.
to the other side.
that's fair enough.
And if the gaps are the way you say it, even on, if it's a Saturday, we're there.
I've got another question. You said that there's gonna be some townhouses across the street.
Yes,
What happens to the traffic when those townhouses go in?
that's included in the traffic study, in the background traffic growth rate. It's 70 townhomes. It's not, I do have the traffic study that another traffic engineering firm did. That traffic's included in the analysis, so it's 70 townhomes. It's about 40, 45 peak hour trips.
I have a question. The 8 seconds that you use.
Yes.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I can't make a left turn with traffic coming at 45 miles an hour in 8 seconds and feel comfortable. And especially if I'm just coming out of a doctor's office, which
Okay.
I'm ill, or I might have heard something I got a distracted mind if I heard something. So I question that norm of 8 seconds.
Well, that's what traffic engineer, it's not 8 seconds, it's 7 is what the traffic engineering field uses as an acceptable gap. But I do want to go over some numbers for you, because as I've said, I only measured gaps that were in excess of 8 seconds. I want to give you some actual numbers so that you better understand what the nature of the gaps are. From 5 to 6, which is the highest peak hour traffic flow in the afternoon, there were 13 gaps from 8 and 9 seconds, 8 gaps 10 to 11 seconds, 8 gaps 12 to 13 seconds, 8 gaps 14 to 15 seconds, 7 gaps 16 to 17 seconds, 3 gaps 18 to 19 seconds, 5 gaps from 20 to 21 seconds, 4 gaps from 22 to 23 seconds, 6 gaps from 24 to 25 seconds, 3 gaps from 26 to 27 seconds, and 1 gap from 28 to 29, and there are actually 25 gaps in excess of 29 seconds. So I just want to make you feel comfortable that you don't have to take an 8-second gap. Okay.
Okay, any other more questions from the board?
This whole site triangle, okay? If you're gonna be, I don't know what's going on in Middletown, whether it's been approved or nothing. If your project got approved, then you need that site triangle long before that project may need the site
Correct, and
triangle.
we've stipulated that.
So, to rely on that they're gonna get the approval from the county, I think you have the onus to get that approval, right?
Yes, we do, we agree. We're not relying on that to happen. My expectation, I've worked with the Monmouth County engineering professionals for 35, 40 years. My expectation is they're gonna look at these projects in combination with each other. They're gonna look for a road widening on both sides of the road, probably look to put left turn lanes in, things of that nature. So they're gonna look at the two projects cumulatively and determine what they need as far as road widening, restriping for turning lanes, things of that nature. But having said that, we understand that at this juncture, because that project hasn't been approved yet, it's not to the best of my knowledge, we have to get the site triangle.
Okay, any other board questions? Nothing else?
I'm still
You
listening.
guys are okay with
Yeah, no,
what
I'm
we're
listening.
talking about?
I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm taking it in.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, how about Mr. Simon?
Yes.
Simon? You want to speak first, and then I'll open it to the public.
Sure, I have a lot of questions.
Okay, that's good.
Where do you want me to go?
Come up to the mic here.
Yeah, I'd like to sit if possible.
Just don't hit each other.
No, no.
If you want, you could also hold this mic in your hand.
Yeah, I think it was a sit.
Yeah,
You can take
okay,
that.
I'll go grab.
Take this mic next to you, so this way he has a mic to respond
I'm
into.
actually a good musician, so I'm all good with this.
It comes off here, it comes off the.
It's-
Yep, I'm gonna actually do this.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Ray, good evening. So, I just want to make sure I'm clear in terms of what the public is reviewing as part of your analysis. So, I have a December 8th, 2023 report from McDonough and Ray consisting, I think, of, 7 pages signed by you and Mr. Kennel.
Correct.
Right. Is that the complete traffic report that you submitted to the board in support of this application?
It is, but as I indicated, I did do a follow-up gap study, a second gap study in the fall of 2024, just to prepare for this meeting. It's
Okay.
not part of the traffic report.
Okay. Did you present, file any findings from that September 2024 gap study to the board?
No, but I can.
Okay. So it's a little difficult for me to cross-examine on a half a report, but for now, to keep the ball rolling, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Ray submit that report or supplemental findings, written findings, and we'll take a look at that and decide whether we need to ask further questions based on that
Are
submission.
you okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay. So will it be done?
Okay. Thank you, appreciate that. Mr. Ray, when were you first retained for this application?
Actually, it was some time ago because I did do the parking study first, because we wanted to determine how many parking spaces we needed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, put the mic aiming. Now, so when you say, is it for this application, or was it, there was other proposed items for this site?
Yeah, for this particular application, I was engaged in August of 2023.
Okay, so you were engaged in August of 2023, and you said you did the parking study first.
That was for another file that was opened a couple of years previous, when my client was just looking at this property, contemplating doing medical office space, and wanted to know how much parking he would need.
Okay, so all you,
That's not an issue tonight. We're gonna meet the parking requirement. I don't even wanna discuss it any further.
well,
But it's your field.
Thank you, John. So with regard to that parking study, the first parking study that you did, that has nothing to do with this application,
Absolutely
correct?
nothing. I'm not relying on it. Just thought the board would like the information.
And with regard to this application, you performed a parking study for this application?
I just looked at the parking that was provided at 199, which the engineer testified to 2 meetings ago, I think, and it meets the ordinance requirement. So very simply, I don't want to be confrontational, but we meet the parking requirement. I do not believe it is an issue. I only provided the other parking data to the board because I thought it might be helpful if we're successful in going forward with a site plan application and we get the variance, that they would know that they don't have to build all the 199 spaces up front. We can bank some of them.
Okay.
Commonly done.
Okay, I just want you to answer the questions that I ask of you.
Oh.
So with regard to this particular application, you reviewed the application plans and related materials that were submitted in support of this application?
Well, I reviewed the plans. I didn't review all the other paperwork.
And with regard to the site plan or the plans that you reviewed, is that the variance plan that has been referred to in prior meetings on this application?
That's correct.
And with regard to the layout of the variance plan, did you have anything to do with the precise layout of the plan, or were you just asked to identify the number of parking spaces that were required for the application?
I was asked to review it and to make sure that it conformed to proper traffic engineering principles and to review the number of parking spaces, but I was asked to review the circulation, yes.
And when you were asked to review the circulation, the variance plan had already been designed by others, correct?
Well, I believe a few tweaks were made to it, so the general layout of where the buildings were gonna go and the circulation aisles and things of that nature, that generally was laid out, but I do believe the engineer made a few tweaks to it over the course of time.
Was the tweaks based on your recommendations?
I don't believe so.
And as part of your involvement in this application, you did not suggest any alternative design with regard to this variance plan, correct?
Well, the one thing I did suggest, if you look at the variance plan, we have separate left and right turn lanes coming out to Red Hill Road. The original plan only had a single lane for both lefts and rights, and I recommended to the engineer, my recollection is that we put separate left and right turn lanes in.
Before you made that recommendation to have separate left and right-hand turn lanes along with the one ingress lane, did you happen to check the ordinance to determine whether 3 traffic lanes out of a single driveway is permitted?
No,
And do you know the width of each one of those 3 drive lanes, the 1 ingress and the 2 egress?
looks like they're all 12 feet.
Do you know, based on the ordinance, if that is permitted or whether relief is required?
I do not know. I only know that it's proper traffic engineering practice to do it this way.
When you say this way, are you talking about 1 ingress and 2 egress out of a single driveway?
Correct. In my opinion, it is proper traffic engineering protocol to do it that way.
Okay, but you didn't check the ordinance
I
to
did not check
determine.
the ordinance.
And with regard to,
Can I interrupt you a second?
Yeah, of
All these
course.
questions you're asking, and we're not hearing the rest of it. either can our planner or engineer jump in and tell us yes or no to what he's suggesting, because I'm not sure what the ordinance is myself. So it would be nice to know what it really is, unless you know and you could tell us that too. for a
Well, we
fact.
we can certainly, I'll get to that, but it's not, I'm not doing a, I gotcha. I'm just trying to
I
assess
understand that.
the witness's credibility, that's all.
Well-
And we'll certainly, through our testimony, when it comes time for that, we can certainly enlighten the board.
Yeah, because all you can do is question right now, right? You can't
Just
provide
asking, just
testimony.
asking
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, well, then I need our engineer or our planner or somebody to jump in and tell us what's, what it is, because we'll forget by the time later on happens.
Well, you're gonna review, yeah, I think he's gonna repeat this. Yeah.
Dimitri, I can help out. We can provide that, but I think, I think I would recommend it, it's up to you, but let Mr. Simons kind of take this to where it goes, and if we disagree or have any issue with it,
All right.
we can jump in then.
All right, we'll do it that way. Go ahead,
So-
I'm sorry.
Yep, thank you. So other than the traffic study that you submitted dated December 8th and the supplemental gap study that you're going to submit to the board, did you create any other written studies, reports, or observations in connection with this application?
No.
And with regard to the gap analysis, there's only a gap analysis in the report during a PM peak street hour, correct? From 3 to 5:45,
Correct.
right? And that was on a Monday afternoon, correct?
If you've looked at the date, you're probably correct.
I did look at the date.
Then I take your word for it.
Okay. And you did not perform at that time any gap analysis of any AM peak street hours, correct?
I did not, because our exiting volumes are lower and the two-way traffic volumes on Red Hill Road were lower during the morning peak hour. So I looked at the worst case, which was the afternoon peak hour.
So, what about for Saturday morning, when the operator said that the buildings will be in operation? You do any type of AM or Saturday morning peak hour analysis?
I did not for, again, the simple reason that although the building may be open and there may be some medical people practicing on Saturdays, Saturdays are not the peak day, not the peak hour. The ITE data is pretty definitive on this.
Did you actually, the ITE data, the Institute for Transportation Engineers data, they don't perform any type of study of Red Hill Road in Homedale on a Saturday morning, correct? No. They don't, right? And so you didn't do a peak hour study for a Saturday morning, and you didn't do any type of gap study for a Saturday morning, correct?
I did not, and I'm sure one of your experts can do that, and I'd be glad to review it. It'll be a waste of money.
So other than what you testified to that you're going to provide us the information for and what's contained in your December 2023 report, no other gap analysis was performed at any other times, correct?
Well, I said I did do a supplemental analysis in 2024 that I testified to, which
Right.
I will provide the data to the board and the
Right.
board's experts, and yourself.
Okay. And, you said, I'm going to hop around a little bit just because you hopped around a little in your testimony. You said that the 70 townhomes that are contemplated to be in Middletown across the street, that was included in your study. I didn't see that, and I apologize.
It was included in the growth rate, as I indicated.
In the growth rate?
Growth rate.
Okay.
And by the way, that, to the best of my knowledge, unless someone knows better, it hasn't been approved. And the protocol for doing a traffic impact study is to include projects that are approved. This project has not been approved yet.
Okay, do you know the status of that project?
I do not.
And with regard to the growth rate, is it actually called out in the growth rate in your report for the 40 townhomes?
I don't know if I indicated what the growth rate was. Yeah, the DOT's growth rate is 1% per year.
Right, but I'm asking you whether you referred at all to the project across the street in Middletown for the 40 townhomes that you discussed this evening.
I was aware of it, and it was my expectation that it could be folded into the growth rate,
Okay,
in my opinion.
Right, but it's not included.
It's not going to make a difference, Mr. Simon. If
Mr.
your expert wants to
Mr.
include it,
Mr. Ray,
we could do it.
It's going to go a lot faster. I'm just asking you to
I'm in
answer
no
the
hurry.
questions that I'm asking you.
I want to answer
The-
your
the-
questions fully.
The 40 townhomes are not referenced in your report, correct?
40
Is it 40 or
townhomes?
70?
70.
70, I'm sorry,
70,
70, my fault.
Correct.
70, okay, thank you. And with regard to other projects in the area that would utilize or have traffic cross Red Hill Road to and from the Parkway, what investigation did you do to determine approved, pending, contemplated projects in the area?
I just looked at the one across the street because I was aware of that.
Other than that, did you perform any type of OPRA, Open Public Records Act, or other investigation to determine pending, contemplated, approved projects in the area at any time, either prior to finishing your December 8th, 2023 report through today?
No, I relied on the NJDOT's background traffic growth rate because that basically encompasses what's happening in the area. They have historical growth rate data, so I rely on that. The county accepts it, the DOT accepts it. But no, I didn't do a wide-ranging study of other projects within a 5-mile radius.
Okay, and the DOT data that you're referring to, you have no idea whether that data takes into account any pending, contemplated, or approved projects in the area that will make use of Red Hill Road in the vicinity of this project, correct?
It takes into account whatever the historical growth rate has been on Red Hill Road. The only other thing I would say is since we're looking at a fairly short design year horizon, I think I looked at 3 years before, if this was approved, it could be built out. I really don't know of anything in the area that's going to be built within the 3-year horizon for this project that would have any kind of a significant impact.
But you didn't look independently, correct? Yes or no? You didn't look, right?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I don't know why I have to answer it 2 or 3 times.
So are you aware of any traffic in the morning period due to schools, whether it's the high school, middle school, buses, vehicles?
Sure, that was included in our morning peak hour counts.
And-
And they were lower than the afternoon counts.
And how many days did you go out to determine the AM and PM peak hour?
It was a one-day count when the schools were in session, no weather-related issues, no detours. Let me finish. No traffic detours. Our traffic counters are very, very well-trained in if anything is happening, if there's a police car out there, if there's a detour, if there's an accident or something that's causing traffic volumes to be at non-routine levels, they stop the count, they come back and they tell me. It was a normal, routine weekday.
So one day, and what was that day, that one day, where you determined the AM and PM peak hour?
All right, the PM count was done on Thursday, September 14th, 2023. And the AM count was done the same day, Thursday, September 14th, 2023.
So so from the time you were first retained in, let's say, the summer of 2023, through today, so let's say roughly a year and a half, that you ascertained what the AM and PM peak were based on one day in September, correct?
Incorrect. I did the gap study in 2024, which also gave me, in addition to gaps, traffic volumes.
Did you determine, because we don't have the data yet, did you determine the AM and PM peaks in 2024 based on that second day of your gap study?
No, because the gap study showed results that were similar to the 2023 gap study. I did not make any adjustments to the traffic volumes.
So just to be clear, so the day of the traffic study was Thursday, September 24th, 2023. What was the day of the gap study? I was trying to get my dates here.
Okay.
I was writing things down.
No,
there.
I think the date of the traffic count was Thursday, September 14th,
Yeah, okay. Traffic count.
2023.
Okay.
The gap study was done afterwards, because when I ran the analysis, I saw we had an E level of service. The gap study was done on November 6th, 2023.
2023, okay.
Yep.
You know, I'm sitting and listening to this, and there's a lot of variables that nobody even brings up. Bellworks is not too far away from there, and they have a big, huge meeting hall that at any one day, they could have 200-300 people that would come down that road in probably individual cars. And there's no way for you to know what date that would be, and I don't know how that would affect all of your results, but it definitely does happen.
I understand, and if it's something that happens on a fairly irregular basis, that's not something we designed for, like
I figured you
designing a
would say that.
parking lot for the, Friday after Thanksgiving. You don't design for that. So
I know.
if it happens a couple of times a year, not something I can
Well, it probably
design
happens
for.
more than a couple times a year, or it's
Okay.
getting more and more popular for meetings.
And with regard to, and if you can refer to a site plan or the variance plan that is submitted as part of this application, can you identify, you keep talking about the needed, and we'll talk about it in a minute, about the needed site triangle. Can you just identify on the plan where that is?
It's on the opposite side of Red Hill Road. Our engineer at the meeting that he testified to did testify to it. I believe he provided if I'm not mistaken, I believe he provided an exhibit showing the side triangle. I have a reduced copy of it, but I think he talked about it and presented it at one of the previous meetings.
Okay, and just, so it's across the street on Red Hill Road in Middletown, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and how many linear feet is the site triangle?
My eyes aren't that good. You'd have to ask our engineer at the next meeting.
So you didn't do any, as part of your analysis, you did not do any analysis of the precise site triangle that is required for this application?
No, our engineer, who's a professional engineer, did it. Mr. Weslowski, yes.
And there's at the Garden State Parkway intersection that you referred to earlier, the southbound Red Hill Road is 2 lanes and northbound is 3 lanes, correct?
Yeah, the 3 lanes northbound, 2 through lanes and a right turn lane into MSK, yes.
And but Red Hill Road eventually becomes a 2-lane road that it's going to be adjacent to the subject property, correct?
It does now, but as I indicated before, it's my expectation that as part of the county approval, a widening will be required on our side of the road and more than likely on the Middletown side in connection with the other projects. So I believe the county will require us and that applicant to widen the road.
Okay. Has any road widening either on the applicant's property or on the Middletown property that you've identified to be across the street, has that been taken into consideration in terms of this application? Has this been shown anywhere on any plan?
It hasn't been shown because it's up to the county to ask us what they want.
Okay, but based on your communications with the county to date, what is your expectation in terms of road widening?
I have no expectation. It's up to them. I don't want to guess at it.
I don't want you to guess either. Based on your communications with the county to date regarding this project, did they indicate to you whether a road widening for Red Hill Road is going to be required?
They have not indicated that yet, but it's my expectation that they will.
And if roadway widening is required, and it's going to be required on, and I apologize, John, if I got this wrong, on your side of the property, is that going to require that a portion of the frontage of your property on Red Hill Road would have to be dedicated to the county?
Not necessarily dedicated. The county has accepted easements in the past as well, too.
Okay, but you don't know in this particular case whether they would accept an easement to the property or whether the dedication would be in what's called fee,
Yeah.
where they would actually take the property.
The issue hasn't come up, to the best of my knowledge. Now, again, our engineer actually made the application to the county, probably a question best asked of him. He might have more information than I do.
And your counts, and I apologize if I got this wrong, you didn't conduct a peak hour traffic count at the location of the proposed driveway, correct? Just at the intersection of Red Hill Road and the Garden State Parkway exit 114 off-ramp, right?
Correct, because that gave me everything I needed.
How do you determine what date you're gonna do this traffic study? Is it just random?
No, it's not random. You have to pick a day that is, schools are open. We always check these things. We make sure there are no detours, no construction in the area. I can tell you that NJDOT routinely accepts traffic studies for projects much bigger than this based on a one-day traffic count. Because what we have found over the years, and you asked the question, I'm sorry if I'm getting a little long-winded, but what we have found over the years is that particularly on a road like Red Hill Road, which is a commuter road, there are businesses located like MSK, we have found that traffic volumes vary very little from day to day during the weekday, morning and afternoon peak hours. Very little variation.
I understand what you're saying, but earlier when I talked about Bell Works, if you happen to have picked that day that parking lot was filled, and the reason I know this is I go to the gym there, and I go there sometimes and there's no place to park. I'm thinking, where are all these people coming from? So if you happen to have picked that date, these results would be very different.
And my only thought, I'm not sure about the dates, but, so it's a Monday, November 6th was the second study, the GAP study. That may have been the teachers' convention week where a lot of the kids are traveling for school. There's not a lot of
The
traffic.
school might have been closed that day.
What was that?
School would have been closed.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
teachers'
or
convention.
people just travel and go on vacation that week. They
Yeah.
take their kids out of school, so that may have been,
Yeah,
that may have lowered it.
I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I'm going to submit the updated GAP study, which was done in 2024. I'll get that date, I'll get that information to you too, so you'll have two GAP studies to review, not just one.
Question for you on the four lanes. If you have 4 lanes, is it going to be harder for people coming out of your development, medical offices to make that turn?
Actually, 4 lanes will make it easier because the through traffic will be in 2 lanes and it will get through the area faster than if it was all in 1 lane, it'd be a constant steady flow of traffic. When you have 2 lanes, it kind of buffers that out a little bit because now you have 2 lanes for traffic to move in and rather than 1, and there are more gaps.
Okay, so you say there'll be more gaps, but you will have to travel further to get across the 2 lanes and into.
Correct.
Okay. So it'll take you a little longer, but there should be more gaps, is what you're saying.
That's one way to describe it, yes. I would agree with that.
Francine?
Well, I was going on that I don't know if it's going to take only 8 seconds to get across now if you've got more lanes.
There are a lot more than 8-second gaps there. I don't want to go back over the numbers again. I'll submit the new gap study and everybody can look at it, and I think it's pretty definitive, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in it.
Are you gonna
Simple
be-
as that.
Are you gonna be back to testify when you present that?
I guess that's up to the board. I was hoping not to, but I don't have to worry. I don't think there's going to be a Yankee game on that night, so I'm not going to have to worry about it.
And just to be clear, so there's a
I'll be
second,
here.
there's a second GAP study. Is there a second day of study, the traffic count study? There's 2 different reports, right? Is there a second one of those that I think that your assignment is
No,
Simon?
no, there's only a second gap study, not a second traffic count. But from the gap study, we have counts as well, too, so I can summarize the data
Okay.
for count data as well.
So, I hate doing this. So, it seems like that Mr. Ray is going to come back with some additional information that he hasn't yet submitted, that he's going to submit to the board, and we'd want to have a chance to look at and ask him questions on. I have many more questions. I'm just, asking the board whether it's efficient at this point for me to keep asking questions if he's going to come back and submit some additional information, or whether I should wait until he comes back and submits all his information provided to the public, so we have a full and fair opportunity to review it, and then in one shot, ask him all the questions.
Do I have a choice here?
No, it's, of course you have a choice.
Because choice B.
Well, how much longer would you think your line of questioning will be?
I have a lot of questions, but again, if there's information, it works both ways. If there's information that he's gonna be providing that seems satisfactory to me, then I wouldn't go down a certain line of question. If there's other information that begs additional questions, I may ask additional or different questions. Just wanna be efficient. You're all volunteers, and so,
I mean, I would vote for you to continue your line of questioning. I'd prefer that right now. We're here, it's fresh in our memory.
that's fine with me?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. So, Mr. Ray, neither your AM report or your PM report provides data regarding any delay, queue length, or level of service for Red Hill Road traffic from the Garden State Parkway intersection heading toward the site access, correct?
Incorrect.
Incorrect.
There's data in the back, there's an appendix with the level of service calculations with queuing data for the existing no-build and build condition at that signalized intersection. There is data. If you want to know what the queuing is, we
Right.
have the data.
And the level, the level of service, PM level of service is what? An E?
Not at that signalized intersection.
No, at the site driveway.
The projection, we have no traffic generated now. The projection is based on the ITE data, the traffic generation estimates, that it would be level of service E. Whenever I see a level of service E, I usually supplement the report with a gap study. That's why I did the two gap studies.
Okay, so let's stick with level of service. So, level of service E, just to break it down, based on your report on page 4, an average control delays of not more than 50 seconds per vehicle in an unsignalized intersection or at an unsignalized intersection, correct?
I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, I'm reading on page 4 of your report, of your December 8th, 2023 report. The paragraph that begins, levels of service range from
Correct.
A to F, with
Okay.
A being the highest, I'm sorry, John, or best attainable level of service. Level of service E, with average control delays of not more than 50 seconds per vehicle at an unsignalized intersection, or 80 seconds per vehicle at a signalized intersection, indicates near to or at capacity conditions.
That is correct.
And so that means that when somebody is making a left-hand turn out of that driveway, that how many seconds, put your gap study aside for the moment that you did on 2 days, that how many seconds is that car sitting there waiting to make a left-hand turn just based on ITE?
Based on our calculations, it's a combination of a left and a right. It's a weighted average. The average delay would be 46.6 seconds per vehicle.
So when you say weighted, is that weighted 2/3 left-hand turn?
Correct.
1/3 right-hand turn?
Yes. The left turn would experience more delay. It would actually be 63.6 seconds. But let me back up for a second and explain this. I know lawyers like yes and no answers, but that's why I did the gap study. The level of service calculation does not take into consideration the gaps that are created by the signal at the exit 114 ramp. That's the whole reason for the gap study.
And in terms of gap study, when somebody is making a left-hand, and so let me back up. In terms of the delay of in excess of 60 seconds, what that means is, putting aside the gap study, that somebody is approaching the intersection at the driveway, wanting to make a left-hand turn to go toward the Garden State Parkway, and they have to sit there for over a minute before there is a gap or an ability to make the left-hand turn. That's what it means, correct?
Not necessarily.
No?
I think you twisted that around a little bit.
Okay, why don't you tell me what it means? What level of service
Well,
E
it-
means
it-
60-second delay making a left-hand turn?
It means that if you were mid-block and there were no signals on either side of you and there was a continuous flow of traffic, the numbers that are in the report, that would be the correct delay. That would be 60 seconds. When there is a traffic signal located a couple of 100 feet from our site driveway, it changes things dramatically because it does periodically stop the traffic flow.
Okay. And when that car is, and by the way, you said 1/3 right-hand turn, left turn, 2/3 left-hand turn. You said you determined that based on population?
Population densities.
Population densities. So explain what that means in terms of population densities in Homedale, to the left and to the right?
Oh, it means adjoining towns as well. There's higher population density north of the parkway than south of the parkway. It's an inexact science, but that's the general nature of it.
Right, so, but did you do any calculations that are contained in your report or otherwise submitted to the board that led you to conclude that it's, literally 2/3 left and 1/3 right as opposed to,
No,
I
it's-
don't know, 75-25, 80-20?
No, it's an inexact science. That was my best estimate.
And so if the numbers were different and it was determined through a comprehensive study that in fact 80% of those who are going to be visiting a medical facility are going to be making a left-hand turn and 20% are going to be making a right-hand turn, that would change some of your calculations in terms of the delay in service, correct?
Correct.
And I apologize, I missed this. So based on the site driveway, and we'll get into the design in a minute, when somebody is waiting any period of time to make a left-hand turn, there's going to be potentially other vehicles who are going to be during a peak hour, who are going to be queued or stacked behind that vehicle wanting to make a left-hand turn, who also is going to want to make the left-hand turn at some point.
Sure, that's a
correct?
possibility.
Have you done, and I didn't see it, did you do any type of analysis based on even your numbers that you've provided as to how long the queue will be during a peak hour for vehicles lined up waiting to make a left-hand turn? How many vehicles are we talking about? Did you do that analysis?
It's part of the printout. I can give you the
Okay,
information.
but you didn't.
It's not in the report, no.
No, it's not in the report. Okay. And so does the PM report, I thought, identifies a level of service F for left turns out of the property?
Yes.
Okay. So level. so-
Okay.
Yeah, so level, I'm gonna let you, don't worry.
Okay,
So
I want to
level-
just give you, I want to give you the
Yeah.
answer to the question you asked. The 95th percentile queue length, which means 5% of the time it's going to happen, there would be a queue of 2 vehicles making a left turn.
2 vehicles.
2 vehicles
At a peak hour.
at a
And-
peak hour,
and
yes.
So in other words, it's 5 o'clock, and based on your analysis, that when, let's say, people are leaving the medical office, patients are leaving the medical office, whoever had appointments or the last appointments, that there's going to be a maximum of 2 vehicles that are going to want to make a left-hand turn.
That's what the queue analysis shows, and actually, that's the 95th percentile queue analysis, so 95% of the time, it's going to be less than 2 vehicles.
Monday with physicality study, Monday, November 6th.
And
Thursdays would work.
the,
Miss Wednesday, which
the
is-
PM report indicates a level of service F for left-hand turns out of the property.
That's what it,
Correct.
that's what it shows.
Okay. And it's a level of service B for right-hand turns.
I believe that's the case, yes.
And so a level of service F, can you explain to the board what that means?
It's delay in excess of 50 seconds for an unsignalized intersection.
So,
It's not failure, it's delay in excess of 50 seconds.
so is that, and that's the 63 seconds that you're
Correct.
you're referring to? And based on your analysis, that you're gonna have approximately 57 vehicles per hour, per peak hour, anticipated to make a left-hand turn out of the property, correct?
54, yeah.
54, okay. Did you consider the impact, so across the street, if I recall, is a right turn only into Memorial Sloan Kettering, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you, as part of your analysis here, did you, for this application, did you assess how many vehicles make, during a AM and PM peak hour, because you didn't do a Saturday, make that right-hand turn into Memorial Sloan Kettering, as opposed to going up to the traffic light and then accessing MSK from there?
I don't think we picked up that volume, no.
So, let me just see, before I get into parking for a second, just bear with me a second. And when you look at a gap study or perform a gap study, the driver, speak for myself, when I'm making a left-hand turn, the driver's not able to assess how many seconds of the gap there are, right? When assessing whether it's safe to make a left-hand turn, correct?
The driver generally knows from looking at how far away the car is, what the perceived speed of the car is. The 7-second gap is universally used by traffic engineers, accepted by DOT departments all across the country as an acceptable gap. So I don't know what else I could say.
Okay. But other than that, you didn't do an assessment whether it's, perception at night versus during the day? Night meaning like when there's, sunset, whether it's, in the wintertime at 4:30 p.m.?
No, there's no adjustment made for that.
Okay. And there's no adjustment made, as was asked earlier, commented earlier, as to whether, somebody is 30 years of age or somebody is 80 years of age, correct?
There's no known adjustment that I'm aware of to do that, no. Nothing's been published. No studies have been done, but I understand what you're saying.
With regard to the parking spaces, the 191 parking spaces are what's proposed, correct? Because you're taking some credit for the EV, or am I wrong on that?
I'm not sure exactly what the engineer did. You might be right that we're taking credit for the EVs.
And certain number of those parking spaces, and by the way, do you know where my client's property is located?
No.
Okay, so my client's property is located to the south of this property. I'm just referring, Mr. Chairman, to the use variance plan, just to orient Mr. Ray. So I don't want to give him some foundation for the questions I'm going to be asking him. So so you didn't do any type of assessment as part of your role on the development team as to how close or how far any of the parking spaces are to residential properties, correct?
Not typically what a traffic engineer would do, so the answer is no.
And you didn't do any type of analysis in terms of the design to determine whether the sole ingress and egress driveway for this entire site happens to be within 80 feet of my client's residential property, correct? That's not part of your,
Not part of
Role.
yeah, exactly.
and with regard to the studies that you referenced in your report, and I think you attached to your report, actually, and you used the ITE parking generation manual?
I'm sorry, I only referred to the ITE parking generation manual in terms of, yeah, trying to inform the board as to the actual number of parking spaces I thought we would need, rather than the 199 that's required by the ordinance.
Right, and which generation of the ITE parking generation manual did
It
you
was the
refer to?
latest, I think it was the 5th edition, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but the sixth edition got released in October of 2023, correct?
Not certain about that.
Okay. And the data that was compiled by the ITE, whether it's fifth generation or sixth generation, did you look at that data?
Run that by me once more.
Yeah,
I'm not-
you know, the
Excuse me, Mr.
the
Chair.
traffic.
Can I just interject? We've already stipulated that
You need a mic.
we already stipulated that we're gonna put in the 199 spaces with the EV credit that's required in your ordinance. The other information, although offered anecdotally, really has nothing to do with our application tonight unless the board's gonna consider less parking spaces. So I'm not sure where, other 20 minutes on that line of questioning is probably not the most efficient use of
Well,
time.
we did talk about the parking in the past in one of the hearings about rearranging it. I don't know if we spoke about eliminating any, but we did speak about rearranging it.
Kate, could you recall your testimony a little bit? I think you were the one who jumped in and said that you thought we could reduce
At
parking.
the last hearing.
Yes, at the last hearing.
I don't have the minutes or anything in front of me, but I know that it came up, no decisions were made, due to the circumstances here where the engineer was not going to be present, but was going to be questioned. We agreed that no changes would be made to the plans pending more discussion from the board. And the idea would be, because what's the situation here is that there is not actually a parking requirement for this use in this zone. The closest comparable is the medical office equivalent for the M zone. And I believe it's also permitted in one of the Route 35 zones as well. So we use that, but it is not technically a variance. So the board does have the ability to, the same way as, you know, we went through this at the last hearing, we went through this with other applications, because of the way that the R40A and B zones are written, there are no bulk standards that apply to non-permitted uses. So that is why, you know, they're here requesting a D1 variance, but they do not need relief for the height. They have to show, you know, why. It's all part of the use variance application, and parking is the same situation here. So I think that part of what, you know, we can go back and listen to the tapes, but part of what the board, I think, had wanted to hear somewhat what the traffic engineer had to say about the parking, which I think that testimony was put on the record tonight. But we agreed that no changes would be made to the plan because the civil engineer was going to come back and be cross-examined, and then the board would be able to make a decision in that case. And I believe also, you know, as Mr. Ray said, the idea wasn't that, you know, that parking didn't have to be provided. It was that it could be phased or banked potentially for future use if needed. But again, no decisions were made at the last hearing. No one was instructed to change the plans, et cetera.
But I remember speaking about eliminating the parking spaces or rearranging them facing the neighbor's property.
Yes,
Your client's property, put it that way.
yes, that was
So we
part of
spoke about that. Now, actually eliminating them or reducing them or relocating them, we never got into those details. We kind of left it open-ended. It might be something that they are thinking about.
Right, which sort of leads to my comment a little while ago, which is that I don't need to go down a line of questioning if something is going to be, you know, obviously resolved to the benefit of my client, but I have a job to do if I'm going to be asked to continue to ask questions. And there was testimony presented by Mr. Ray with regard to other medical office buildings that he looked at in terms of the amount of parking that was available or required, that was going to go down that line of questioning. So again, I'm happy to keep going, down this road and ask all these questions and do a comprehensive job. But again, I defer to the board. If you want me to continue to do that, I'm happy to do that. If you want me to wait based on, after the, like you said, after the civil engineer testifies in terms of the parking plan.
I mean, it's up to you. I mean, we don't have anything else, so when you're done, I'll open up to the public, and then the meeting will be over at that point, right? I presume there's nothing else, no other testimony. So I can let you keep going for another 15, 20 minutes at the most.
Okay, I mean, that's
I mean,
fine, or I can come
If it's,
back.
if it's
No,
relevant.
I think you should keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, I agree with
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Simon, the only thing I would say is that, and this is up to, if Mr. Simon wants to do this, is that, with no decision being made tonight on the parking, I think the concern was last time was that since he did not have the opportunity to cross-examine the engineer at the last hearing, then that was why we wanted to reserve that. But I think that, if that's something that you wanted to talk about tonight, maybe the decision could be made.
Yeah, it's not appropriate now without the engineer here, because maybe he's gonna come back with some new proposal. We don't know.
Well, but I'm saying is that he never got a chance to cross-examine
Right.
him on the prior one, so I don't want to take that away, and that's a little more of a legal issue, but I think that was the reason for not having, even though it's been about, 2 months or so, that's why no changes were made during this interim time period.
Okay.
Because reserving that right.
All right,
Yeah,
keep going.
I'm not, arguing about the process, other than just to comment that I do respectfully disagree on the interpretation of the law in terms of the fact that when you have a use variance, that if you have deviations from the local ordinance, even if it's for a different zone, it's not like that those deviations become irrelevant, particularly with regard to not just the D1 variance, but in this case, you have 2 D6 variances for height, you have other setback violations and the like, and that all becomes relevant, in our respectful opinion, legally, in terms of the board's consideration of this application.
I just want to say,
So-
I did not say that those things were not relevant.
Yeah,
I
okay.
never would say that, and I disagree, and this board has dealt with this in the past. A D6 variance is not necessary here because of the way that the ordinance is written. However, when reviewing the use variance, the board can and should consider what's permitted in this zone for height, what's permitted in other zones for parking. You should and can consider all of that. I did not say that that's not something for the board to consider. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah,
We spoke about height too, so.
Yeah, no, that's okay, I just
at
want to
past meetings,
get
so-
my position out. So, let me continue? Happy to
Go
continue.
ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Ray, you had nothing to do with the precise location of the access driveway for this site, or the precise location of parking spaces laid out at this property, correct?
I wouldn't say I had nothing to do with it. I reviewed the plan that the engineer prepared to make sure that the driveway was properly located and the circulation system, in my opinion, worked. So I wouldn't say I had nothing to do with it, but I did not design it.
Okay. And you didn't take into consideration in your review of those elements adjacent residential properties, correct?
Well, I knew there was a residential property adjacent to it to the south. I didn't know it was your client, but I didn't see where our driveway location would be in conflict with the driveway for that property.
Right. And do you know how far the ingress-egress driveway for this site is to my client's property?
I don't know the exact number, but it's probably about 100 feet.
Do you think it's probably less, isn't it? If you
Well-
look at the plan?
The DOT accepts driveways 24 feet apart from each other on high-speed, high-volume state highways. So I look at that, I look at what this spacing is, I think it's acceptable.
For what, for purposes of safety from the adjacent driveway?
Correct.
I see that there are areas on the site adjacent to the 2 medical office buildings where no parking is proposed. Do you know why, and that are closer to those buildings than the parking spaces that are closest to my client's properties. Do you know from a site circulation or parking standpoint why those areas closer to the medical buildings were not considered, considering they are medical buildings, were not considered for additional parking?
I do not. That's a question better asked of the site engineer.
And with regard to the medical offices that you took a look at in terms of parking, what was your conclusion in your report regarding those? I think there were 6 medical buildings.
My conclusion was that it might be information the board would be interested in if we got to the point where we got an approval for this project and we were thinking of banking some parking. But again, we can provide the required 199 parking spaces. It
And-
was only some information for the board's consideration.
Right, and did you do any type of analysis for those 6 medical office buildings in Homedale as to the parking ratios that were provided for those sites?
No, just the actual counts.
And when you say actual counts, the number of parking spaces that were used?
Yes,
Okay, and that information is not contained in your report, correct?
not in this report, no.
And that has not otherwise been supplied to the board, correct?
There was no need to. We meet the parking requirement. It was just informational for the board's consideration. Not something I relied on to draw a conclusion.
Right, and have you done any type of analysis as to appropriate parking ratios for medical buildings adjacent to residential properties or in residential zones?
From a traffic engineering perspective?
Yeah, from, you've testified this evening regarding site circulation, traffic, and parking. I'm asking whether you have done an analysis of parking ratios for commercial buildings such as medical buildings adjacent to or within residential zones.
Whether it's adjacent to or in a residential zone, there's a requirement that a medical office building needs to meet, and that's really what I look at. As to whether it's adjacent to or in a residential zone, it's irrelevant to me. If the buildings are X number of square feet, they require X number of parking spaces.
And in terms of the tenants, I believe that the operator testified that there's going to be approximately 6 tenants at these 2 buildings. Do you recall hearing that?
I don't recall hearing that.
But you don't know, regardless, the type of medical practices that are going to be in either or both of these buildings or their related parking demand, correct?
I don't think my client has any tenants lined up. I think he just has a general belief as somebody, I heard his testimony at the first meeting that he's a longtime resident of the area. He believes there's a need for this, and that's all I recall.
Are you aware whether different types of medical practices generate different parking demands?
Sure.
Right, so, if you have a dialysis practice or a retina practice, that you may see a higher volume within a peak hour of patients than other types of medical practices.
I don't know
correct?
about those uses, but a pediatrician usually gets a higher volume.
Any other types of medical practices that get higher volumes that you're aware of based on your studies?
I really couldn't give you we don't break it down into different types of medical uses, because when you get buildings like this and you have multiple practitioners, you're going to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it all balances itself out, and that's where the parking requirements come from.
The 6 facilities that you observed, that you didn't provide the information for in your report, they're not located in a residential neighborhood, correct?
I have no idea.
Did you perform any other counts of medical buildings, whether they're in Homedale or elsewhere?
Oh, I have in the past in other towns, in Old Bridge, and I give, it's probably a list of towns. I thought the Homedale sites were relevant to Homedale.
And with regard to the other sites that you did look at, whether Old Bridge or elsewhere, did you perform those counts as built, like once the sites were up in operation as
Yes.
medical facilities?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your finding in terms of appropriate parking ratio even for those sites?
My finding consistently was that the ITE numbers that I used them, that I put in my report for informational purposes are probably the best predictor of actual parking demand.
And did you actually perform studies to confirm that?
Yes.
And you supplied those to a board or municipality, as the case may be?
In particular towns where I was asked to do parking studies, in Edison and Old Bridge, I did those parking studies, and we were successful in getting parking variances because the board accepted the data.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you.
Well, that's how I
whether-
answered it.
Okay, I asked you, once the site is constructed and in use as a medical facility, did you perform an evaluation as to the actual parking demand for those medical facilities?
Not for a job that I worked on, but we have been asked to go out and to do studies at other medical offices that clients of mine owned, where they wanted to get a variance for to see what the actual parking demand was, and we went out and actually did those studies. Not necessarily site plans that I worked on, but actual medical offices. I don't know how else I can answer it.
You talked about your company going out and doing counts. You didn't do any of these counts yourself, did you?
No, but as I indicated, I've made multiple visits to the site during the afternoon peak hour to observe traffic flow. I believe the counts are accurate. I believe the gap studies are accurate based on multiple visits I've made during the afternoon peak hour.
So you didn't do any of the counts or the gap studies. Did Mr. Kennel, who signed your report,
No.
do that?
No.
So neither you nor Mr. Kennel, the two people who were signatories to your traffic report, did any of the traffic counts or the gap analyses, correct?
No, we rely on a traffic counter that works for us, that has been doing traffic counts for us for, I don't know how many, 25, 30 years.
Excuse me, could you identify that person for the record?
I could if I went back and looked at whether it was Mr. Torlucci or his son that did the counts. I could do that. If you would like that information.
I have a
Mr.
question for you. You said you went back there to the site a couple of times.
Yes.
The same day of the week that you did the last report?
It was
or
on,
different?
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't tell you exactly what day of the week it was, but it was a weekday. It was during the peak hour on a weekday.
Okay, because one of the reports were done, what, on Monday and a Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, because Wednesday is a big day for Bell Works. They have
Okay.
farmers market.
It
That's what
might
I
have been
missed.
on a Wednesday, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Generally, what I do, just to explain a little bit more detail, you asked the question, if I was in the area and I was close, I didn't bill my client for those hours. I stopped and I looked, I spent a half an hour, 45 minutes to look at the traffic flow, if I was in the area.
But it's not on your report saying that you saw that what day and anything like
No.
that? Okay.
And with regard to your traffic counts as well as your gap analysis, it didn't appear that the person, whoever it was who did those counts, was there for a full day.
Only for the hours that we prescribed them to do the counts, correct?
Okay, right? So you told them to go out during particular times of the day when in fact the peak period or even a near peak period could be at a time where they weren't there, correct?
Highly unlikely.
But you don't know. 'cause
Highly
you-
unlikely.
But you weren't there,
Highly
correct?
unlikely.
But you weren't there?
Highly unlikely.
Can you answer the question, please, sir?
I just have.
Excuse me, I think this is taking a little long because when you're given a question like the one you were just given, could you please answer and then you can
I
explain
thought I
why
did,
it's
sir.
highly unlikely.
I thought I did.
You
Please
just said
rephrase
it's
the
highly
question.
unlikely.
Is it possible? Yes. The odds of it happening are extremely low. That's all I can say. If I can answer it that way. Every traffic engineer that does traffic counts and traffic studies in this area of Monmouth County knows when the morning and afternoon peak hours typically occur. And as I indicated before, they routinely happen every day with very little variation.
And with regard to a peak hour, a peak count for a particular hour is not necessarily spread out throughout that hour, right? It could be all concentrated within a particular 15-minute period, correct?
There's something that we call the peak hour factor, which measures the consistency of the traffic flow during the peak hour. I can tell you that any peak hour factor that's 0.9 and above is very consistent traffic flow, and I could give you those peak hour factors.
Are they contained in your report?
Yeah.
Okay, then we don't need to,
No,
So
okay.
when you talk about peak hours, is peak hours vary depending on where you're taking this study? Or it's always
it
the
can-
same no matter what the roadway is?
It's not always the same. It can vary. Sometimes it's 8 to 9 in the morning. Sometimes it's 7:45 to 8:45. The peak hour in the morning is the 60-minute period when the 4 consecutive 15-minute periods result in the highest traffic flow. So, at the signal at MSK and exit 114, peak hour in the morning occurred between 8:15 and 9:15, and in the afternoon between 5 and 6 on the day that we did the counts. But I just want to indicate there's very little variation, like from 4:30 to 5:30, 5 to 6, maybe 5% variation. But all of our studies are based on the highest peak hour traffic count.
But is
One
it-
thing, so one thing changed this year, so I know for a fact, the school system moved the high schools later, about I think 30 minutes. So that traffic has definitely changed. I mean, I just know going to PNC for the bus in the morning, everything got set back another 30 minutes. So the
I-
traffic patterns have definitely changed in
I
2024.
understand the high school's start hour was moved up a little bit, yeah. I'm aware of that.
And then also I'm not knocking what your data is based on. I know you need some sort of way to gauge it. But to me, I think it has to be geographic, because if you use the data and it's the same for every part, like if you were on 35, let's say next to the Costco movie theater, that would be a very different number to compare actual data that you're giving us from this statistics that you have versus being on Red Hill Road.
Absolutely, a Saturday
So
traffic.
how do you account for the variation in geographic locations that you're doing these studies in?
Well, you look at the land uses in the area. For example, as you've indicated, the Costco up on 35 is in a highly commercialized strip of Route 35. The highest traffic volumes occur on Saturday afternoons up there. We know that because of the commercial activity, the retail activity. There aren't any retail uses in this area. This is a commuter road, Red Hill Road. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Okay.
Well, it's a high traffic pattern for buses in the morning, the school system. You got a village, you're going to village school system over there, you have SATs in the high school, so you have 3 different schools that are opening in that time frame.
Every vehicle that went through the intersection, whether it was a passenger vehicle, a school bus, a truck, was counted. They were actually categorized. We broke it down into cars, trucks, school buses. All that data is available.
All right, we'll take a look at
So
it.
your count on peak hour is what your person observed? Is that where you're getting the peak hours from?
It's a manual turning movement count. They sit at the intersection, they have the turn, they press buttons and count every car that goes through the intersection.
So it's something that they deserved, it's not something you looked up?
Oh, no, 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 it's an
Somebody
actual
sitting there.
traffic count. It's a physical, yes, it's a physical traffic count, yes.
With regard, I'm sorry, with regard to trip generation, you have in your report 92 vehicles, AM peak street hour, and 117 trips, PM peak street hour, correct?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Ray, did you do any type of analysis as to anticipated peak total trips for a conforming use or uses for this site?
I have that number in my head. It wasn't in the report. The underlying zoning is R40, so that's basically 1 acre, single-family zoning, the property is 5 acres. Subtracting what you would need for roads and utilities, you probably get 4 homes on the property before peak hour trips.
So for 4 single-family homes, what would be the AM and PM peak hour
It would be 4 to 5 peak hour trips
for each?
for each the morning and afternoon peak hour. It would be less than what we're asking for,
It'd
yes.
be less than 92 and 117, correct?
Yes.
And I seem to recall, and obviously you were there because you referred to it earlier in your testimony about the operator's testimony. And particularly, I recall that he was talking about a possible linkage between Memorial Sloan Kettering and the proposed medical offices. Do you recall that?
Not off the top of my head, but if you say it's true, I believe you.
Okay. Did you take that type of potential, it's my term, functional linkage into your traffic analysis? In other words, maybe additional trips going back and forth between the medical office and Memorial Sloan Kettering, depending on the particular use or user in any of those medical buildings?
I did not, but if that activity occurred, trips between it, then actually I think I've overestimated the impact because that traffic is there already. It's going to MSK.
But in terms of ingress and egress trips, it would maybe even be greater, correct? they're
If
going
there's
back and
movements,
forth,
yeah.
Right?
Mr. Simon?
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna end it.
Okay.
You
End
could,
it.
I don't know how much more you have to discuss.
Yeah, I think it's more, I think you're correct. I think it's more efficient. I have plenty more questions, but I want to see the additional data that's being provided, and let's hear from the engineer.
Okay, and I want to give a chance to the public and my professionals to comment on this. I mean, if I was a professional, I'd be lost on where to go begin at this point. But I want to open it up to the public first, and then I'll let my professionals comment on as much as they can from all what was said tonight. Okay, so at this point, any member of the public may come up, and hopefully you won't have as long a question period as we just went through. But I think next time I'm gonna flip this and let the public go first. Okay, so, somebody raised their hand back there? Go ahead, ma'am, come on up. State your name and address and your question. If you can remember it.
My name is Regina Stephanie. I live at 8 Fox Hunt Road. I just want to make a few comments.
Oh, no, this is not comments, questions of.
Questions? Okay.
Yeah, questions of what this testimony happened.
Okay, questions.
Comments are at the end.
I want to know, I've been taking this road for 8 years. Since September, the amount of traffic that has been increased, I am there at 7:45 in the morning and 4:45 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. The highest traffic days are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I want to know, you have to redo the study and do it on one of those days. The amount of school buses, the amount of people coming from Bell Works.
This is not a question.
Oh, okay.
You already said your question.
Can you?
Can you is
Can
your
you.
question. Can you redo it?
Well, I need to go back and take a look at the weekday that we did the 2024 gap study, which was this year, 2024.
I hope it was
I'll
on a
provide that
Wednesday.
information. I don't know if it was a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. It's in the file. I'll provide the information.
And then what time did you do the study?
3 to 6 p.m.
3 to 6, okay, because also the morning is horrendous there.
That's not a question.
Okay.
But I want to try to answer the question as best as I can. The reason why we focused on the afternoon for the gap study is 2 reasons. Number one, the peak hour volumes in the afternoon on Red Hill Road, irrespective of the school traffic that may be there in the morning, the afternoon peak hour volumes are higher than the morning peak hour volumes, point number one. Point number two, the exiting traffic from a medical office is higher during the afternoon peak hour than it is during the morning peak hour. So that's why we did it that way.
Okay. My other question is, what are your plans for the egress? Because, well,
A 2-lane egress, a separate left and right turn lane.
because you have the double yellow lines there, and I can tell you morning and afternoon, there's almost people rear-ending because people are missing
That's not a question.
the turn off. Sorry.
Okay, well, It's not illegal to make a left turn across a double yellow line is just a no passing zone in two directions.
Okay.
So, and as I've indicated before, my expectation is, should this project get developed, or whatever gets developed on this property, and whatever gets developed across the street, the county is gonna ask for a road widening on both sides, and they're gonna ask the applicants to modify the striping. That's my expectation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else in the public have a question? Come on up, sir. Name and address, please, and then a question, or multiple questions.
Greg Litt, 14 Cardinal Road.
What was that address?
14 Cardinal.
Okay, these are gonna write it down, that's why.
I believe earlier you said that
Use the mic. Yeah, hold it if you wanna hold it in your hand.
September 17?
I'm not, I don't think it was
September
September
14th, it was the 14th.
September
I think.
14th.
Yeah, 14th.
Only the 14th, nothing on
2023.
17?
correct.
14th.
14,
It
okay.
was a Thursday.
Thursday, okay. I thought he said 17. Obviously 17 is a Sunday. The deer could cross that street without looking on Sunday.
That's your question?
That's, okay, no problem.
Thank you.
That was an easy one, finally.
Next, anybody else have a question in the public? Okay, no other questions, we close that portion. Professionals, you're on the hot seat. Who wants to go first?
Mr. Ray, did you obtain any traffic counts from the county? You know, it's a county road, because a lot of times they do some backup counts throughout the year.
I
So
did not, no.
Could you try to see if we can,
I can ask them for counts, sure.
that way we can confirm your numbers versus
Okay,
theirs?
sure.
I have nothing as far as the traffic counts. I think I've said, my thoughts on the parking situation, which I know we've discussed was more for the civil engineer, so I have nothing else.
So I just want to hear more about the D6 variance and what's necessary and what is the permission. There's height, there's two issues.
There
height.
is no D6 variance.
Okay, but just tell me
Yes.
more about that. I want to understand this a little bit more.
So, this is a residential zone typically. It permits other uses. Some of those other uses include a house of worship, a public school, etc. The zone provides for those conditional and other permitted uses, it provides specific bulk standards for those. It also has the general bulk standards, which are intended to apply to single-family residential dwellings. This is a common misconception with this zone. I was guilty of it myself in a past application in a property nearby in the R40B zone. And, we discussed it with council and we realized that this is actually just like, it's kind of like a loophole in the ordinance. But because the bulk standards are specific to certain uses, if someone comes in with a use that is not permitted in the zone, not contemplated as a conditional use, not contemplated at all, there are no specific bulk standards. So if you look at the zoning ordinance, you'll see a table, and the table has different columns in it, which one will say single family cluster, single family non-cluster. It'll say not house of worship is now conditional use, but it'll say something like like school, museum, library. And that's it. It does not just say, here are the standards for the R40A or R40B zone. So that's unique.
But on the other hand, if you looked at those standards and they all were said that maximum height is 35 feet.
Thank you, Gene. You're about to get there. So when we talk about a D6 variance, that's something that I'm not sure if this board has seen one. Do we want to see that many of them? A D6 variance is a height variance. It is required when a building exceeds the permitted height by either 10% or 10 feet, whichever is less. So I believe this is a 35-foot maximum height for a single-family residence in this zone. If someone came in with a single-family home, for example, that was more than 38.5 feet tall, which is 10% of 35, they would require a D6 variance for height. So the applicant here is proposing 40 feet in height. So this is, because of the way this zoning is written, the D6 variance is not specifically required. However, all of this consideration of the height, consideration of the parking standards, consideration of everything that's been discussed can and should all be part of your analysis of the D1 use variance that's being requested. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that is because the standard of proof for a D1 use variance is the highest of any of the variances. The applicant, they'll have to show particular suitability. They have to meet the Medici criteria. They have to show why, how this can be balanced even though it's not permitted in this zone, reconciled with even the fact it's not permitted in this zone. They have to meet all of those standards. And they also have to meet the negative criteria. Those standards, those positive criteria, this particular suitability and also the Medici reconciliation, those are not required for any of the other D variances. So if they came in here for an application, if it was in a different application, say they needed a D6 variance, it's similar to the ones that we look at for FAR or height, where you have, or FAR or density, where you have to show that the site can still accommodate what's being proposed. So when this board you'll hear lots of planning testimony later on down the road from their professional planner, and I recommend that this board takes all that into consideration. But all of those things that you usually look at just in terms of a D6 variance or something like that, that's all from my perspective, that's something that is all part of the consideration of a D1. Because you're looking at that particular suitability. You don't have to sort of zero in on whether the site can accommodate the height. You're looking at whether the entire proposal whether the applicant has proved that the entire proposal, including the number of buildings, the square footage, the site layout plan, because that's what we're really looking at here. We're looking at a conceptual site layout, which, we'll get more into the bifurcated nature of this application as we progress further. But when you're looking at all of those, it has to show particular suitability. So it's all kind of holistic, but that is why, I know that it's a little complicated. It's a unique zoning, it's very unique for our zoning ordinance. But that's why the idea of a D6 variance has been raised, but it's not actually required. That does not mean, as I said before, that does not mean that you shouldn't consider it. You absolutely should. Everything is at a higher level of the D1 variance.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, no other further questions?
No,
from
Francine
anybody?
has something.
Oh, Francine, raise your hand.
You say for the traffic, you need that site triangle?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you think the county would approve that site triangle if it doesn't think that it's going to be needed for another project that's going across the street, a proposed project? In other words, would the county give you the approval for that site triangle and widening the road just for your project?
If my client reached an agreement to get that property from the property owner, yeah, the county would approve it.
And widen the road? Pay for widening the road
Well,
for
the-
one
the-
project?
The site triangle isn't required for widening the road. I want to make it perfectly clear. It's
Okay.
required because coming out of our driveway, making a left turn to go north on Red Hill Road, there's a horizontal curve in the road. We're on the outside of the curve, which is a good part of the curve for sight distance, but there's vegetation on the inside of the curve that limits your ability to see northbound traffic on Red Hill Road. That's got to be cleared
Okay,
so that you can see a certain distance down the road.
okay,
So it's not for road widening purposes, it's for line of sight.
okay. But in other words, your client would have to be able to obtain that site
Yes.
triangle?
Yes,
And if that owner doesn't want to do it, would the county intervene
they have in the past.
for one project?
They have in the past, yes.
Okay, because the reason that I'm asking this is if they would do that only because they anticipate the development of that other land, then your traffic study needs to take that into consideration.
I-
Because it's saying that, once that happens, there's going to be more additional traffic around that site, which would affect your traffic study.
Well,
Am
the
I
site-
correct?
The site triangle is in the traffic study, and I specifically mentioned it because there are two issues that a traffic engineer deals with: safety and capacity. Safety trumps capacity. You have to have a safe site triangle. We can argue about levels of service all day long, what they mean, whether they're real or perceived or whatever. Safety trumps capacity. You've got to have the site triangle.
Okay, well, just, that's my point about whether
Understood.
it would affect your traffic study.
And just generally speaking, I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but what is the status of these 70 townhomes? Has it been approved?
There is ongoing litigation. That's
Okay.
all I know.
Okay.
Okay.
One follow-up to that, I know you
Yes.
mentioned about growth, 1% historical. I don't know about any other place in New Jersey, but in Monmouth County and in Homedale, I think our growth rate is not traditional or not typical. So I don't know if that's a reasonable thing to rely on, because I see it right in Homedale. The development that's going on here is unbelievable and affecting traffic. I mean, I've been living in this town for how long? And the traffic at certain intersections and things, it's unbelievable.
I've been living in Monmouth County for 40 years. I understand what you're saying, but I have to rely on the DOT's historical growth rate data because the county accepts it, the DOT accepts it. I've got nowhere else to go but the DOT data. I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Anything else from the board before I change the subject?
Last question. Looking at your traffic impact analysis statement, unless I missed it, I see that peak or critical PM traffic is defined as 3 PM to 6 PM. I didn't see where peak or critical AM traffic is defined, what hours those are defined as.
I think it was 8:15 to 9:15.
8:15 to 9:15?
Correct.
Then can I ask, why is it a 3-hour window for critical PM traffic, but only a 1-hour window for critical AM?
Because we have found over time, generally speaking, the afternoon peak hour tends to be spread out a little bit more than the morning peak hour. The morning peak hour is a little bit more concentrated. So to be on the safe side, I stretch it out from 3 to 6. As I indicated before, the actual peak hour was 5 to 6. It used to be years ago when I first started doing consulting work in the county and in the state, we would do a 4 to 6 count for the afternoon peak hour because almost inevitably that the peak hour would be somewhere between 4 and 6. I stretched it out to 3 o'clock because I just wanted to make sure I had enough data. And if you look at if you look at the summary, the 3 to 4 hour is the lowest of the 3 hours during the afternoon. 3 to 4 is the lowest, 4 to 5, second lowest, 5 to 6 is the highest. I just wanted to make sure I had enough data. We've learned over the years that sometimes 3:30 to 4:30 is the peak hour in the afternoon. So we stretch the count out.
Yeah, so you're going to do your own study, but I would suggest maybe doing a longer morning study as well, bringing it out to like 7 a.m. because that's when all the buses are out there, school buses. That's when a lot of the commuters are going to PNC. That's all along that road there, Crawford's Corner.
Well, let me see what, give me 1 second. I want to see what the morning peak hours were how we stretched it out in the morning. Actually, in the morning, we did 7 to 10.
Oh.
We did 3 hours.
Okay, all right, I thought it was 8:15.
We did 3 hours.
So 7 to 10, that's,
Yep.
8:15 was what was measured.
okay, all right.
Yeah, but of that 3-hour time frame, the one peak hour was 8:15 to 9:15.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so I know earlier I spoke about doing an on-site. After thinking about it, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think we should wait till after the engineer speaks, because if there's gonna be changes in the plan, there's no sense in Mark going to see something that's not what it's gonna end up being.
That's fine.
So I think the next thing is Courtney to give us a date. I presume it's gonna be January.
We're gonna carry to reorg.
Oh, yeah,
not
that's
for
right.
testimony, just to carry it to a date certain without notice.
We know to have the calendar,
Then it's
that's
gonna be
right.
carried again to a date at the reorg.
Yeah,
When's the reorg?
that's right.
You'll get a
All
new
right,
date
so then on January 8th, we'll meet and we'll
So
pick a new
What
date
I'll,
for you.
what I'll do in the interim with Mr. Simon is we'll get from you what your projected dates are for 2025, so we can try and coordinate our professionals, so we don't have to do it piecemeal, and try and get it as much done in
Yeah.
one night.
This way, that's why Courtney has everything all ready to go, so when that reorg, she'll tell us what date.
Yeah, we want it at the reorg, go to a certain date.
Right, and we'll try and work that out in advance, so that night you can set a date for us. We'll
Okay.
try and work that out.
And then after the engineer, I don't know if he's gonna incorporate any of our comments from the last meeting, then we'll pick an on-site date.
That's fine, that's fine.
Okay?
So, would you make the formal announcement?
So this is gonna be carried to January 8th, same time, 7, which is our reorg meeting without further notice. It will be only for carry purposes only, there'll be no testimony at all. At that date, we will pick a new date, and that will be the next actual hearing date.
And all of the dates will be on the website.
All the dates are on the website.
Yeah, so there's no need to all come to that meeting.
But I presume Courtney will notify Mr. Simon, obviously. Thank you.
Have a great holiday, everyone.
Thank you. Can I have a motion from somebody to adjourn the meeting?
I second that motion. Well, no, I think we were gonna do, Marty, we're gonna ask Marty to just, give us an update on the building, the project. And I want. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we're good, I just want, I have a question. Yeah, I have a question. What goes? Marty.